Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Holly Winter Huppert. She is here to celebrate right now. Ideas for Writers. Right now, we're going to ask Holly to wait in our green room for just a second before we invite her into the studio. We want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. So much you can do there. First off, if you're not familiar with podcasting apps, you can go to our website. You can subscribe to the podcast on our website. We have our own podcasting page that you can subscribe to, readingwithyourkids.com. You can also find links to your favorite podcasting apps like iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, you name it, we have the link there. You can also subscribe to our free newsletter. Find out what's coming up on the show. Find out what you might have missed. Check out all of the great reading lists my daughter is creating. There's so much there. You can find it all at readingwithyourkids.com. And you also want to check out our live events. We would love to come to your community. Bring some magic and some reading into your community. Go to readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Parents Click Here button. Scroll on down to live events. You can find it all at readingwithyourkids.com. Joining us right now from upstate New York, our author today is here to celebrate right now. I mean, not like right now, but right now. Ideas for Writers. Please welcome to the show, Holly Winter Huppert. Hey, Holly, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
I'm really happy that you are here, and I'm glad you started laughing. That's always wonderful to hear. People laugh at my lame jokes. This is great. So why don't we start by talking about right now, ideas for writers.
I will. Here is my book, Right Now, Ideas for Writers. So I am a teacher in my 31st year in the classroom, and I wanted a book of writing prompts for my students. I really, really wanted them to be able to write silly things and serious. You know, as a teacher, we need them to write serious. I couldn't find anything with writing prompts that were fiction and nonfiction, silly and factual. And so I wrote one myself, and it's my photographs in it, and it's selling quite well around the world. So I'm very happy. And the right now is WRIT. I know you're making a joke, but I thought I'd point that out.
Now, somebody out there might be listening and thinking, hey, you're a teacher. You've been teaching for a while. Why do kids need to write about write silly things? Kids are silly all the time.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I could take that in a million different directions. Everything from, the guy who writes the Captain Underpants series, who also now writes Dogman series. He started that Dogman series when he was in 4th grade. And included in the series is a very angry letter from his teacher saying he only wants to write these ridiculously silly things. They're not, kids are kids. They're young. They want to laugh. They want to play. They want to have fun. They have a lot of time in their life to write a research paper. But we want them to be able to, have fun and be silly and show up on the page in their own unique way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. Back in 1989, wow, last century, makes me feel old saying that. Back in 1989, I created a disabilities awareness video. It was called Meltdown, the Walls Are Separate, and it was a live show that featured singing and dancing and magic and clowning. and a message that kids with handicaps are kids and can be wonderful friends. And so we had actors and actresses who had various abilities and different abilities, and it was really well received. But in my hometown, I wanted to present it in my hometown, the school system that I grew up in. And so I sent it to their evaluating committee, and they came back with, well, it's a great message, and the people are really talented, but we're not going to show it to our kids because it's too much fun. And I thought, what did I miss?
I know. It's the part of teaching I don't like, the part where you must be serious all the time, and this is school, and get to work, and sit down, and don't tell me about your loose tooth, and don't tell me about your puppy. You need to just go to work. And that's not the way I am as a teacher, but many, many people are, and it's very sad.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you've been teaching for 31 years. My beautiful wife is in her 33rd year, so I have to take my hat off to both you and her and all the other teachers out there. You do a tremendous job. We talk here on the podcast about the fact that if you read with your kids, starting from, when they enter the world, from right out of the womb, that by the time they get to school, just reading to them 15, 20 minutes a day, they will have heard over 1 million more words than their peers who weren't read to. As a teacher, is that true? Are you able to sit down and spend time with a kid and say, this kid's been read to, that kid hasn't?
I really can. And I can give you an example from today.
Ooh,
so today was library, and we're doing library virtually. So the librarian comes onto a computer screen in my classroom and reads 3 books to my kindergartners. Today there were 3 kindergartners. That's not a typical day, but there were 3. One of those kindergartners has been read to every day of her life by her parents. It's their favorite time of day. Before bed, they cozy in and they read. A second girl her parents just started reading to her last year when we said, you really want to read to your children. It'll be helpful. So they started about a year ago, and the third one has never heard a book read. The girl who's never had a book read was not able to focus on the stories. She has trouble learning in an auditory way. She doesn't have the vocabulary. She doesn't have the background knowledge. She's not ready for kindergarten. And it's really sad because there's not a lot I can do to catch her up, but I am trying. The second one, who started having books read to her a year ago, can't sit for a half hour and listen to a story. She doesn't have the stamina. She doesn't have the ability. The girl who's been read to a lot, I can tell. She sat up straight in her chair. She listened. At the end, she could talk about the story and what it meant. We really can tell.
Yeah.
We can tell who it has really been read to. Their brains are different.
Yeah. That's interesting that you say that the brains are different. Now, it's really unfair. I mean, when you look at it and you sit down and you think, wow, this shouldn't be. Every kid should be at the same point starting off, especially something in kindergarten. They should all be starting at the same place. But the reality is that they're not. For whatever reason that child hasn't been read to, that child that's in your class, that really is a shame. And I wish there was some way, and hopefully we can find a way to make that better. But the parents who are out there, who are listening and thinking, how important is it for me to read today? I got another thing to do. That gap, we just noticed the different starting points that those 3 kids are at in your class. It's not like that disappears over the first year of kindergarten. That child who comes in being read to every day is just going to increase that gap. Am I right about that? Is it,
Yeah, you really are. Years ago, I have a nephew. He and his girlfriend got pregnant, and he said, Aunt Holly, what's the one thing you want to tell me about having a child? Come on, you're a teacher. Tell me something. And I said, all right, read her a book every day. And he said, why? I said, if you read her a book every day, she'll be the smartest kid in her kindergarten class. And he went, really? I said, if you want to be sure, read her 2 books a day. But yeah, I can guarantee it. She will be the smartest kid in her kindergarten class if you read her 2 books a day. A year later, I was back in town. visited with a family, and there was this 1-year-old girl piling books up. And I said, how does she love books so much? And he said, oh, remember when you said that? Remember when you said she ought to read 1 book a day? Well, just to be sure, we read her 3 books every day. This child was and my nephew and his wife, they're not academics. Mm-hmm. They don't understand school. But she was the smartest in her kindergarten class, and her whole school was easy for her. See, that's what you want for your child. We're not talking about putting flashcards into the crib and forcing learning. We're just talking about by reading, you're absolutely changing your child's brain, and you're going to make learning easier. What a gift that is for my great niece to have learning be easier her whole life.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that when learning is easier, it's fun and it's not a chore. It's something kids look forward to.
Exactly. And that's what we want. So we want learning to be fun. We don't want to worry about struggle and trying. I have a good friend who is a reading teacher, and I have 2 friends who are reading teachers, and I want to tell you quickly because I did a little research today knowing I was going to come talk to you. One of these friends has a daughter who is 16 months old, so 1 year, 4 months old. I said, how many words is she speaking? Because at this age, you would want a child to have about 20 words in her vocabulary. And this little girl I have it here, she has 40 words in her vocabulary. Her mom sat and wrote them down. That does include sign language, and that counts as a word. So it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really is. Mm. And she has many, many, many more things that she understands. So this little girl who has a mom who understands that reading aloud is going to absolutely change her daughter's brain, and is doing it. Yeah. Is at an advantage already. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing. And I know, again, there are parents out there, they're the executives, they're busy executives, and they're saying, yeah, I don't have time to read 20 minutes a day. I need to make money because I want my kid to get into Harvard. In Harvard right now, it's $85,000 a year. And I don't know what it's going to be like 18 years from now, $850,000. So I need to work now, and she'll get the reading somewhere else. And you're telling me.
So the thing is, you can't buy this. You can't procrastinate giving your child the vocabulary they need. They need it now. And I have to be honest, and this is what I say to my parents. If you cannot give your children 20 minutes a day, there's a problem. Mm-hmm. You need to reorganize your life. And I really understand. My second friend, who's a reading teacher, she has a newborn. I said, how many minutes are you reading a day? And she said, 0. Her life took a tumble after she had her baby. Her father was diagnosed with cancer. Her mother has heart failure. Both of her parents are suddenly on death row, and she is not able to read 1 word. And I'm like, that is okay. There are times in your life when reading is not something that can be done, and there's no shame. We all understand. Mm-hmm. And I reminded her, talk to your daughter more. I understand there's so many phone calls and doctor's appointments that you are running around. It'll be okay. You're going to figure it out. So I want to say to the parents listening, there's no shame. Just see if you can fit it in. They did these studies. I love studies. I love research. And they did these studies on stay-at-home parents and how much time did they spend one-on-one with their children. They're home all day. So what quality time did they give their children? And the research showed they got about 25 minutes a day. 25 minutes a day. And they're like, well, how about a full-time working parent? How much quality time? Truly quality. That doesn't mean get in the bathtub, get out of the bathtub. That means I'm sitting with you, I'm looking in your eyes, I'm talking to you, I'm maybe reading you a book, maybe we're drawing a picture together. Quality time. And they found that working parents did between 15 and 20 minutes a day of quality time. So parents, according to research, you do have that time built in. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who has young children, and the only time she can read aloud to them is when they're in the bathtub. That's it. That's all she has. They're in the bathtub. They're playing. They don't always look at every word on the page. Doesn't matter. Your children don't have to look at the book even while you're reading. They just have to hear the vocabulary. Mm-hmm. So there are ways to find. I have another mom who has to ride a bus with her child every day. I said, can you read to your child on the bus? She's like, well, I was just letting him play video games on my phone. So could you trade that time and read? And she has, and the difference has been tremendous. Mm-hmm. So finding that time, got to be able to.
Yeah. One of the things that my beautiful wife and her best friend is a principal of an urban elementary school. My wife has been teaching in an urban school for, like I said, over 33 years. I walked up to them one day and said, hey, how can we motivate parents to read more with the kids? How can I take this podcast? And they said, you got to realize that a lot of the parents that we work with, they can't read. They don't know how to read. They're not able to read, or they're not able to read in English, or they're working 2 or 3 jobs and they come home and they're exhausted. And it's not that they're bad parents, it's they're in this circumstance. What can those parents do, especially the parents who aren't able to read themselves? What kind of things can they do to help their kids get the benefit of being read to?
So these are really important questions, and I am asked them often by the families I serve as well. I also work in an inner city school with families who are working very, very hard and don't have a lot of time. First of all, let's talk about dual language. If you don't speak English well, it's absolutely a very good idea to read to your children in their native tongue. So if you speak Spanish at home, or if you speak a Hindi language, whatever you speak, if you can read books in that language to your children, that is wonderful. Really work on their home language. That matters. So if you cannot read, first of all, many people, literacy, when you say you cannot read, they can read on a kindergarten level or a first grade level. Many people who are not considered literate. Literacy in Mexico, I think it's an 8th or 9th grade level. It used to be. I don't know if it's changed. So our literacy rate is actually lower. It's 5th to 6th grade level. So some people who are not literate may still be able to read to their children. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind. Also, if you absolutely cannot read to your children, it is 1,000,000% important for them to hold a book. So if you can go to the library and get books for free, and they can just flip through the books and look at the pictures and notice that there's words on the page, even if you don't read to them. I know a case of a student of mine who went through a very serious neglect. His mother kicked him out of their New York City apartment every day, and he spent the entire day at the library. No food, no water, no care. He was first grade, and he just picked up books and looked at them. The librarians are the ones that finally turned him in and got him the support he needed away from his mother. But that boy learned to read. He didn't have a teacher. He learned to read. Now, I think the librarians probably they're like, what do you like? And he said dinosaurs. So they probably they probably helped him choose dinosaur books, but not at a low level. So there are ways to learn to read just by looking at words and starting to recognize them. I'm not saying you can learn to read without help, but I'm saying that he had a little bit of reading in first grade before this happened, and that little tiny bit he was able to build on. If you don't have books at home, try to go to the library. Libraries do not require a passport or proof of citizenship to take out a book. Try to tell stories and read books in the native language. And if none of that will work, if you can't get to the library, because I understand you're very busy, you really can get a lot of benefit if you're telling stories to your children. So talk to them. Tell them stories about when you were little. Tell them stories about when they were little. Tell them stories about what happened on your way home from work and you saw a lady with a funny hat. Talk to your children, not like they're babies. Mm-hmm. Use regular vocabulary.
Yeah. One of the things that, and again, when I spout stuff off here on the podcast, I'm just some old guy, just shooting stuff observations that I've made over the years. I've talked a lot and said a lot on this podcast that the time that you spend with your kid, whether you're reading a book or taking a picture walk through a book and looking at the pictures and talking about them, or sitting down with your kid and telling stories about your day or about the crazy people who grew up in your neighborhood when you were growing up, and that time spent, it's so valuable because you're the most important person in your child's life. They look up to you. And when you sit down and spend time with your kids, when you say, everything else can wait, I'm spending this 20 minutes with this child, that in itself says a lot. Am I right about that?
Yeah, and children look forward to that. So I have a boy, kindergarten boy, who came in one day and said, my family had a meeting last night. And I said, what was the meeting about? And he said, well, my father stood up and said, and held, there's only 3 people in his family, his mother, his father, and this 5-year-old boy. And he had done some work at school that he was able to read just by repetition. He really he wasn't able to sound out the words, but he memorized them. And his father stood up and said, in this family, we now have another reader. He will help us do what we need to do. He has responsibilities. And he did this whole ceremony. And that little boy came back to school so excited to read. I have to work harder because my family needs me. I'm going to help them read the mail, and I'm going to help them find things on the phone with words. And he was so excited.
Wow.
And his father's really busy.
Mm-hmm.
But he just had, I love that story that he just found a way to celebrate what your child can do.
Yeah. Oh, so important. I just love this. Hey, I want to make sure we've been talking about kids and we haven't spent a lot of time speaking about the incredible things that you're creating. I understand you have a video on YouTube that's helpful for families. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
During the pandemic, parents of my students and in my school and throughout the country, the people who have reached out to me, they're like, how do we teach writing to our children? We know writing helps reading. You always say that. What can we do? What can we do? So I decided to put together, I called it a masterclass for parents of young children. It's called the Writing Masterclass for Parents of Young Children. It's free. There's no charge. I put everything I know about writing, including the reading-writing connection and how it will help you, into this YouTube video. And I've also sent copies. School districts have paid. I do consulting on the side. So not everyone who's watched it has watched it on YouTube, but I put it there for free. Anyone is welcome to go look. It is long. It's almost 3 hours long because I just decided that this is what I know and this is what I'm putting out there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. It's not just a lecture. It's kind of fun. And I find fun ways to talk about it. Lots of student writing and samples, many, many ideas.
Yeah. That's what a great gift for families. So thank you for doing that. 3 hours, the beauty of this day and age with technology is, you don't have 3 hours. Well, you can always hit that pause button and get back to it the next time you have time.
Exactly. And I did a really good job. I really worked at putting the timestamps so you could jump in and go, well, I want to know how to motivate a child to write, or I want to know the different levels, or what if my child refuses? What do I do? So there's a lot of timestamps so you can jump in at certain points and just watch what you need.
Yeah. I think we could talk all night long, but I want to ask, I think everybody appreciates the fact that, reading with our little babies, that's really important. But once they can read independently, I can check out. I don't need to read with my kids anymore. I don't need to co-read with them. I don't need to talk to them about what they're reading in school. Is there value in continuing to read with our kids once they become independent readers?
I'm really glad you asked this question. Many parents think, well, my child is in first grade and she has now learned to read at a first grade level, so I'm not going to read to her anymore. Yay, I just got 20 minutes back in my day. And actually we want you to keep reading until your child is 12, at least 12, and maybe even longer. I know parents that they enjoy reading so much they've kept reading right through high school even, reading. So when your child listens to you read, they're hearing really hard vocabulary words said at the correct tone, the correct pace, the correct pronunciation, that they're not going to they won't have the background knowledge to understand. So we want you to read. We want them to hear the phrasing. You can use funny voices, whatever works. It absolutely helps your child in every way for you to keep reading. Now, the thing is, your child's going to be like, well, I want to read. Sometimes you can do every other page. Sometimes you can let the child, you read one sentence, I'm going to read the rest. I just want you to listen now. But, I am a special education teacher by trade and a regular ed teacher. So I do both. And I will tell you that I have a student right now, her mother is very learning disabled. And her mother is terrified that her daughter will be learning disabled. Her mother has read to this girl and read to her and read to her. And her daughter has a listening comprehension that's as high as that other girl who is not learning disabled, because her mother has read and read and read to her. So when you read to your children, you're absolutely helping their listening comprehension so that they're, even if they have a disability, the fact that you are reading to them is helping, and you want to keep reading even when they learn to read.
Yeah. And something I think that parents forget, and I when my kids were able to read independently, and I was bummed out because I'm like, I like this. This is special time for me. I know it's their time. I know they're getting something out of this, but I'm getting something out of this. I'm really going to miss this. And I had that conversation with myself. I have a lot of conversations with myself. It bothers my beautiful wife. But right around when my daughter was in second grade, and I remember, I think it was a week after I kind of made that mental decision to let her read on her own, her second grade teacher came up to me and said, "You got to keep reading to her."
Oh,
and
good.
I said, "Really? Really?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Yes." And I go, "Dude, all right." But I think we forget, there's a lot of benefit kids can get from us reading to them, but we can get benefits from it too.
And let me mention that it's important for parents to choose books that they enjoy reading. Like if you're just reading about Barney, the big purple dinosaur, that's going to be so boring for you. Your head's going to explode, and that's not going to be good for your children.
Yes, Barney.
Yep.
Yep.
So you have to find books, and I must say, modern literature, there are really good books that the parents can enjoy and the children can enjoy. And the second most important thing is that it's a book your children will enjoy. Mm-hmm. So let's say you really want to read a book about car mechanics. Your 5-year-old daughter may not really be interested in listening to a book about car mechanics. And I'm exaggerating with that idea, but she might really want you to read her a book with a princess, or she might really want you to read a book with a tornado in it, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So trying to find books in your child's interest level will help them listen and help them learn even more.
Yeah. The first book I remember, it wasn't the first book that I read to my son, but it was the first book that I know that he fell in love with, and I fell in love with reading to him. And it was Dave Pilkey. It was Dogzilla. And it was so silly. It was about this giant dog who just did the Godzilla thing over New York City, I think it was. But it was so much fun, and he loved it. And it was really that, just the beginning of a love affair. And I'm really happy to say both my kids are, 25 and 28, and they both still love to read, and they both still love to read and talk about the books that they're reading with us. And my daughter oftentimes tells me that I'm not reading the right books, and I need to read better books. Anyways, hey, I just want to get back to right now. Ideas from writers. You said that there are a number of silly prompts in there. Can you tell me, because I love to be silly, I want you to challenge me and the listeners out there with maybe the silliest prompt or your favorite silly prompt from the book. And we'll take that challenge and write something.
All right. One of my favorite prompts in the book is a prompt. There's a photograph of a little girl talking to a little horse. They're sitting, and I'll show you. I'm not sure if you filmed this for your listeners, but there's a little girl communicating, talking, looking at a little horse, and they're clearly looking at each other. And the prompt says, and I hear back on this one a lot, I bought you with my allowance. Now you must do whatever I say. And the thing is, you're not sure who's speaking here. Did the horse buy the little girl with his allowance? Or did the little girl buy the horse with her allowance? And when they say, you must do whatever I say, like, what does that mean? You have to do whatever I say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I hear back on that one a lot.
Yeah, you know, as soon as you said that, you set it up with the girl and the horse were looking at each other, and you gave that prompt, I thought, I'm writing that the horse is saying it, because that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and clearly you don't want to, you like to think in your own logical way. You don't want to just be boring. And it's really funny to see how and I'll just add, if you are a parent and your child wants to write about how the horse is really an alien and he really lives underground and eats mice, and it's something really weird and strange, and like, where are you going? I can't tell you how many parents try to reel that in and go, no, son. Horses live in a stable and the barn is brown. So when your children are writing, they get to be the author. They get to be the boss. They get to take it in any direction they want. Silly, stupid, or fun, whatever it is.
Yeah. It's really empowering. Allowing them to create their world is, I think, the first step in helping them understand that, yeah, they can create their world.
Yeah, and there's something about confidence. When a child writes a story and feels confident and good about their story, they can approach other learning with confidence. So once a child, the reason I love writing so much with children, once they write their own story, then they read books in a different way. Because they're like, wait, somebody wrote this story. Somebody made it up. They understand writing. I have a couple of books. I have one here. I have another. I didn't bring the other one out, called Everything is a Song, Our Stories, which are stories that middle school students wrote about their lives. And they're fantastic. It changed their whole perception of what reading is by writing.
Wow, this has been a lot of fun. Holly, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about you and find out all the wonderful things that you're involved in. Where can people connect with you online?
I'm going to tell you that. And I also have a special discount for your listeners if they're interested in coming to my website and checking out any of my products. If you go to hollywinter.com, HOLLYWINTER, hollywinter.com /read. So I put that on just for your listeners. If they want to come and get 10% off, I put a list of benefits of reading aloud to your children. I thought they might be interested in just looking that over and going, yes, this really matters. I want to do it. I would love, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out and ask. And
Excellent. Well, thank you for setting that up for our listeners. So it's hollywinter.com /read. And that's a special page for the Reading with Your Kids listeners out there. That's how important you are. And this has been wonderful. I really appreciate it. We've been speaking to the author of Right Now, Ideas for Writers, Holly Winter Huppert. Hey, Holly, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed being here.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Jamila Khan. She'll be here to celebrate Why Can't I Be Happy? From self-hate to self-love. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Holly Winter Huppert. Please be sure to check out Right Now, Ideas for Writers. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Helen Frazier, Justina Thompson. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to join together to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for telling your friends about the show. But most of all, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.